Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Comment where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. London on a damp Saturday night. Rain streaked long, blurred lines across the window of a small South Kensington flat, where dark red brick rooftops stood pressed together like the pages of an old book. In the warm glow of a desk lamp, Clara Evans curled her legs up on the sofa, hugging a pillow as her loosely tied curls spilled down over her bare shoulder. She had just stepped out of a hot shower, changed into a pale beige camisole pajama, the lightest outfit in her closet, soft as a sigh after a long day. Her phone buzzed softly, a message from Emma, her sister. "Are you off work yet? Send me a smiling photo. Haven't seen you smile properly in ages." Clara chuckled, the sound so small it surprised even her. During the week, she smiled plenty, but mostly office smiles. Polite, measured, appropriate for clients, directors, endless meetings at Whitmore Media. The kind of smile Emma wanted was rare, reserved for the end of the day, when the door was locked, the kettle was boiling, and London outside faded into background noise. She lifted her phone, turned slightly to catch the soft golden light. Her lips curved naturally, the corners of her eyes crinkling, her bare shoulders showing the delicate line of her collarbone. No makeup, no filter, no armor. Just Clara at home, 26 years old after a full day of living. She clicked, snap. The photo startled her with its own beauty. Her radiant smile seemed to brighten the whole room. Behind her were shelves crammed with beloved novels, the Scottish wool blanket Emma had once given her, and a teapot steaming thinly like mist. Clara typed quickly. "Just finished. Hard day, but okay. I miss you." Her finger tapped send almost unconsciously. 1 second. 2. 3. The phone buzzed to confirm. Clara leaned back against the cushion, exhaling. The rain still fell, and suddenly she felt oddly at peace until her eyes flicked to the name on the screen. Adrian Whitmore. Clara's whole body jolted as if plunged into a cold current. She shot upright so fast the pillow slid from her lap and thumped onto the floor. "No way!" The words escaped in a breath. The screen displayed it clearly. The photo, Clara in a camisole, glowing smile, paired with that affectionate line, had been sent. Not to Emma, not to anyone in her family, but to her CEO, Adrian Whitmore, the 38-year-old aristocrat, known for being ruthless, exact, precise as a Swiss watch. Clara opened her contacts and instantly saw the trap life had set. In recents, Emma Evans sat right above Adrian Whitmore. The lamp's reflection, her tired hands, her wandering eyes, and she had tapped the wrong one. A slip no bigger than a pinhead. But that pin was now stitching her entire fate with trembling thread. Her throat tightened. Sweat gathered in her palms, though the room was cool. She imagined Monday morning, the elevator doors opening on the 35th floor, polished wood reflecting Adrian's steps, his perfectly tailored gray suit, his light silver tie. Passing silently through the work area, where not a whisper dared rise, into his office facing the Thames and St. Paul's. There, with one glance, he could strip a regional director of every defense. That man, in all of London's eyes, was a decision-making machine that never miscalculated. And her? She had just sent him a private, casual, even slightly intimate picture, with a sweet line that should have belonged to the family. Her heartbeat thundered. Even the rhythm of the rain seemed to quicken. What to do? Clara clenched the phone so hard her knuckles whitened. She opened the chat window, the preview staring back at her, herself, bare-shouldered under a thin strap, smiling unguarded, skin warmed by the golden light. Just seeing it made her cheeks flush, hot, and shame coil in her gut. Draft an apology? "Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry. I meant to send that to my sister." The words died. The message was to admit it, to tie the knot of humiliation tight. But if she stayed silent, what would he think? That she'd done it on purpose? Was it just a cheap attempt to flirt? At Whitmore Media, rumors spread faster than any primetime broadcast. Clara sprang up, pacing. The small flat wasn't big enough for 3 full strides, but she walked as if she could outpace her fear. Footsteps sinking into carpet, soft and useless. She remembered the first time she'd met Adrian, 2 years ago, at her final interview. The conference room had seemed to grow larger in the silence. He set a Mont Blanc pen on the table, looked straight through his glasses at her, and asked one question. Why you? Not why do you want this job? Not what sets you apart. Just why you? An act of brevity that felt like a miracle. She had answered calmly, clearly, with concrete examples. He had nodded, no compliment. Yet the next day, the job offer had landed in her inbox. In 2 years, Clara had never once allowed herself to slip. She had learned to predict the company's rhythm through each meeting, memorized the coffee orders of New York clients, and read reports faster than the elevator climbed. She had trained herself to catch the smallest shades in Adrian's gaze, reading satisfaction or irritation in the subtle tap of his fingers. Work for Clara wasn't just a salary, it was dignity, a vow to herself that an ordinary start didn't mean an ordinary end. And now it all teetered on the brink because of one wrong tap. The phone stayed silent, no scene, no reply. That silence was strange. Whether a temporary mercy or the calm before a storm, she couldn't tell. Clara went to the kitchen and lit the gas stove. The flame flicked blue, a tiny show of courage. She scooped the chamomile tea, sat at the table, and forced her heartbeat down. Pretend nothing happened. Tomorrow, go in early. Work harder than usual. If he brought it up, explain. If he didn't, never mention it. But the thought, if he brings it up, pressed like a knife at her throat. She closed her eyes, picturing another Adrian. Not the cold CEO, but the man who sometimes lingered too long by the window staring at the rain. Long enough to almost miss his next call. Rare, but she had seen it. Fleeting seconds, like stars bending the sky. Could it be? In one of those moments, he might look at her photo and not judge. She hated herself for letting hope flicker. Hope was the most dangerous thing. It softened exactly where one should stay hard. Clara reopened the chat. The cursor blinked, waiting. She typed, "Mr. Whitmore, I apologize for..." Delete. "Sorry, I meant to send that to my sister." Delete. "It was just an everyday photo, nothing..." Delete. No sentence was both right and safe. In the end, she set the phone down, pushed it away as if it radiated heat. The rain outside thickened. A double-decker bus rolled past, its red light streaking across the pavement like smudged lipstick. The wall clock ticked slowly. London paid no attention to a frantic heart in a fourth-floor flat. Clara pressed her forehead against her knuckles. Shame rose metallic in her mouth. Yet amid the chaos, a whisper slipped through, so faint it might be imagined. What if this was a beginning? Not of a mistake, but of another story. One people don't dare write unless nudged by a wrong tap. She let out a breathless laugh. Not joy, but irony. Ridiculous to think of such extravagance when her career dangled by a thread. Clara stood, switched off the stove, and poured her tea. The warmth of the ceramic cup grounded her. She folded a cardigan, draped it over her shoulders, restoring some modest border around herself. Then she did the only thing possible tonight, set her alarm an hour earlier. As she placed her phone down, the screen lit again. Her heart skipped, only to see a weather alert, scattered showers, light southwest wind. Not a message, not a verdict. Clara turned off the lamp, leaving only a sliver of light leaking through the curtain. In bed, she lay on her side, staring at the ceiling. In the dark, her radiant smile from earlier, the smile meant for family, still seemed to hover between the walls. That smile had slipped the safe boundary, landing in the inbox of a man not known for forgiveness. She pulled the blanket up to her chin, whispering to herself, "Tomorrow, stand tall. Look straight, apologize if needed, and work as if you never slipped." Outside, rainy London breathed steadily. Inside, the clock ticked past midnight, and on the 35th floor of a glass tower across the river, perhaps a phone had just lit faintly, casting a soft glow on neatly stacked files. Clara didn't know that. She only knew to close her eyes, clutching fragile calm like a ribbon, bracing for the morning, when she would have to walk through Adrian Whitmore's office door with a heart stripped bare. One wrong tap, one radiant smile, and a night that stretched too long. The story, whichever way it turned, had begun. Monday morning. London woke beneath a thin veil of mist, red buses packed tightly along High Street, Kensington. Clara sat in the back seat of a taxi, her hand clenching her handbag so hard her knuckles turned white. She had barely slept a few hours the night before. The image she'd sent by mistake still haunted every moment. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw her bare shoulders on the screen of Adrian Whitmore. "Calm down, Clara," she whispered to herself, though her voice trembled. "Maybe he hasn't opened it. Maybe he was busy. Maybe—" The word "maybe" repeated like a loop tightening around her chest. The taxi stopped in front of the towering glass building of Whitmore Media. Its many levels reflected the gray sky and the hurried figures streaming inside for work. Clara drew a deep breath, straightened her crisp white blouse, adjusted her navy blazer, and stepped out. She needed to turn herself back into the reliable executive assistant, not the careless girl who had sent a private message to the wrong person. On the 35th floor, everything was as orderly as always. Employees moved along the hallways, the click of heels mingling with the staccato of keyboards. Clara reached her desk, opened her laptop, and reviewed the day's schedule. 9 a.m. with the executive board, followed by a 10:30 a.m. video call with New York. Not a minute off, not a file missing. She was focused when the atmosphere shifted, like a quiet wind, enough to make everyone sit straighter. Adrian Whitmore stepped out of his private elevator. Charcoal suit, deep blue tie, stride steady and deliberate. His face betrayed no emotion as his gaze swept across the lobby until it landed on Clara. Her heart leapt. He gave a slight nod, the bare minimum of a greeting, and walked straight into his glass-walled office at the end of the corridor. Not a word about the photo, not a sign that he'd seen the message. Everything, at least on the surface, looked perfectly normal, and it was precisely that normalcy that unsettled Clara the most. At 9 a.m., the meeting began. Clara sat at the corner of the table, taking meticulous notes as usual. Adrian presided at the head, his voice deep and steady, each statement sharp. No one dared interrupt. Clara tried to concentrate, but whenever Adrian lifted his eyes from the documents, that silver-gray gaze of his flicked toward her. Not long, not obvious, just a few seconds, but enough to send her pulse scattering. What is he thinking? Clara wondered, burying her face in her notes. Did he look down on her, think her a fool, trying to flirt with her boss? Or? The thought trailed off, heat flooding her cheeks. The meeting ended. Clara gathered the files, her chest still heavy. As people filed out, Adrian spoke. "Clara, stay a moment." Her whole body stiffened. For 1 second, the pounding of her pulse filled her ears. Here it was, the moment of judgment. The door closed, leaving only the two of them. Adrian stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing down at the traffic below. His broad back, his composed stance, unmoving like a statue. Silence. Clara tightened her grip on the documents, her lips dry. At last he turned. His silver-gray eyes locked onto hers, deep, unreadable. Clara felt pinned to her chair, but instead of reprimand, Adrian spoke in a calm, steady tone. "The New York schedule, have you confirmed with the partners?" Clara blinked, stunned. Yes, sir. They've all confirmed attendance." He nodded, his gaze still on her. For a heartbeat, Clara felt as if she had just escaped death, only to fall into another labyrinth. His eyes weren't as cold as usual. They carried something softer, something she couldn't name. "Good work," Adrian said quietly, then turned back to his desk. "You may go." Clara rose, her knees trembling slightly. She stepped out of the office with her heartbeat in chaos. Back at her desk, she dropped into her chair and pressed a hand to her forehead. The entire morning had felt like a play balanced on a tightrope. He hadn't mentioned the photo, but he had looked at her. He hadn't scolded, but his gaze. It wasn't like any look before. Inside Clara, a question swirled larger than her fear of losing her job. What was Adrian Whitmore thinking about her? And she knew this question would follow her in the days ahead. Longer, more confusing, and possibly more dangerous than any boardroom meeting. Late Wednesday afternoon, the 35th floor conference room was bathed in bright light. Directors sat around the long wooden table, focused on the new holiday campaign presentation. Clara stood in the corner, double-checking the printed packets to distribute. She had tried to keep everything running smoothly over the past few days, pretending that the mistaken message had never occurred. But deep inside, every time Adrian's gaze brushed over her, she trembled as if it were the first day all over again. Adrian sat at the head of the table, dressed in a perfectly cut black suit, pen in hand, listening to the reports. His voice was steady, each brief statement carrying weight. Everyone scribbled notes furiously, afraid to miss a single word. Clara glanced at the clock. Just a few minutes left until the wrap-up. She exhaled quietly, forcing her eyes to stay on the papers rather than on the sharp profile of the man at the head of the table. Then suddenly Adrian set his pen down and leaned back in his chair. His eyes narrowed slightly as though considering something beyond the dry numbers on the slides. "The key to a campaign's success," he said slowly, "isn't only calculation. It's real emotion, those natural moments that people can't look away from. Like..." He paused, letting his eyes sweep the table before stopping on Clara. His voice dropped lower, carrying the weight of a hidden confession. Aimim, like a smile that isn't staged. One so unexpected it catches you unprepared and shakes you. The entire room fell silent. No one dared even breathe loudly. Clara froze, her cheeks burning, her heart thundering in her chest. In that instant she knew he wasn't talking about the campaign. He was talking about the photo. She swallowed hard, clutching her folder until the papers threatened to crease. Shame washed over her, but along with it came something else. An unfamiliar spark flickering quietly through her chest. Adrian looked away and continued the discussion as if nothing had happened. The directors bent over their notes, each convinced he'd just offered a metaphor for advertising. Only Clara knew his words had been an invisible thread stretched straight between him and her. When the meeting ended, people began to shuffle out. Clara busied herself with the documents, eager to escape. But Adrian's voice cut through, deep and firm. "Clara, stay a moment." The door closed. Only the two of them remained. He stood beside the table, loosening his tie and setting it on the chair. A small gesture, but one that shifted the air. Less CEO, more man. Clara tried to keep her tone steady. "Do you need anything else, sir?" Adrian stayed silent for a few beats, then stepped closer. Just a few paces, enough for Clara to hear her own heartbeat pounding. "What I said earlier..." He paused, eyes fixed on her. "You understood, didn't you?" Clara stiffened. Each word struck like an arrow at the very spot she had been trying to avoid. She pressed her lips together, lowering her eyes to the folder in her hands, feigning calm. "You mean about the campaign?" The faintest smile tugged at his mouth, a rare expression she had almost never seen. Not quite mocking, more the kind of smile one gives when catching someone pretending ignorance of the obvious. "No, Clara," Adrian said softly, his voice brushing against his breath. "I wasn't talking about the campaign." The air thickened. Clara lifted her eyes, colliding with his silver-gray gaze. Deep, unwavering, offering no place to hide. And in it she saw something she had never glimpsed in 2 years. A genuine tremor of feeling. "Mr. Whitmore?" Her breath hitched. She scrambled for words. I'm sorry about that message. It was a mistake. I dash." He raised a hand, stopping her. "I know. And I don't see it as a mistake. In fact, maybe for the first time, I saw you as yourself." Clara's heart stuttered. The words hit like a gentle blow that still managed to leave her reeling. She, who had always striven for perfection, precision in front of him, had revealed herself through an error. And that error was the very thing that had moved him? She turned away, hastily folding the documents to escape his piercing gaze. As she stepped forward to hand them to him, her hand brushed lightly against his. It was only a fleeting touch, skin against skin, warm and sharp. Yet both of them froze. Clara quickly pulled back, her cheeks blazing. Adrian paused for half a second, his fingers curling as if to hold on. But then he released, returning to composure. "Thank you," he said, voice low and strangely restrained. Clara bowed her head, rushing toward the door. Every step was heavy with a storm of tangled emotions, fear, embarrassment, but also a tremor of something sweeter. The corridor stretched long and white, her heels striking rhythmic echoes against the walls. Clara pressed the folder to her chest, her heart still unruly. What just happened? She asked herself. He had truly meant her. He had truly admitted that her smile had moved him. But why? Outside, London's night hummed, buses rolling past, streetlights casting their glow into the glass windows. Inside Clara's chest, another kind of light flickered to life, not of shame anymore, but of a sweet, bewildering confusion. Friday night. London lay wrapped in mist, golden lights glimmering on the surface of the Thames. Clara walked slowly along the embankment, her fingers clutching the strap of her handbag, her heartbeat quick and restless. She hadn't thought she would accept the invitation, the one Adrian Whitmore had extended after that afternoon's meeting. Are you free tonight, Clara? I'd like to take you to dinner, not as CEO and assistant, but just as two ordinary people. The way he'd said it, low but firm, had left her no room to refuse. And now Clara stood before a small Italian restaurant tucked along the river, its warm light spilling out from the windows, the scent of wood-fired pizza and wine drifting in the air. Adrian was already there, waiting. He wasn't wearing his usual sharp suit, but a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, topped with a dark gray coat. The edge of his formality had softened, and he looked strangely approachable. You're here, he said, his silver gray eyes glinting with something gentler. I hope I'm not too late, Clara murmured, her voice trembling slightly. He held the door open for her. The wooden door creaked softly. Classical Italian music played inside. The small space was warm and intimate, nothing like the luxury restaurants Clara had seen on Adrian's business schedule. They sat at a table near the window, with a view of the Thames glittering under the lights. A server set down a glass of red wine and a basket of fragrant bread in front of them. Clara held her glass with both hands, trying to hide her tension. But it was Adrian who broke the awkward silence. Do you know the last time I sat in a place like this? He took a sip of wine, his gaze distant. 11 years ago, back when I was at Oxford. After that, it was all lavish parties, tables where every word had to be measured. Nothing truly comfortable. Clara blinked in surprise. But I thought you... He smiled, cutting her off. Tonight, don't call me sir. Call me Adrian. Her heart skipped. Adrian? The name felt both strange and intimate on her tongue. He nodded slightly as though that pleased him more than any flawless report ever had. The food arrived, creamy mushroom pasta and seafood pizza. For the first time, they ate and talked about something other than work or schedules. Adrian rested his elbow on the table, his voice warmer than usual. I grew up in a family where every meal felt like a board meeting. My father used to say, a Whitmore must never make a mistake, not even once. As a boy, I believed I had to become a perfect machine, but... He paused, his eyes meeting hers. Strangely enough, a mistaken photo reminded me we're all human. Clara froze. He was referring to that smile in the photo. She set down her fork, taking a deep breath. I understand what it's like to carry pressure. My father died when I was 8. My mother had to work 2 jobs to support my sister and me. We always told ourselves we couldn't be weak, couldn't add to her worries. Maybe I became too precise, too afraid of making mistakes. Adrian's gaze softened. Clara? She smiled, but there was sadness in it. Sometimes I wish I could live more freely. Not constantly straining to prove my worth to someone. Just be myself. A gentle silence settled over the table. Music drifted softly and candlelight flickered. Adrian leaned closer, his voice low enough for only her to hear. You don't have to prove anything. At least, not to me. Clara lowered her head, her heart tightening. For a moment, she forgot the gap in rank and age. She saw only a man quietly looking at her as if she were the one thing he wanted to see tonight. She started to pull her hand back when Adrian's fingers brushed lightly over hers, a polite, brief touch, yet it sent heat rushing to her face. Sorry, he murmured, but didn't immediately withdraw. Clara looked up, their eyes meeting. There was no coldness, no walls between the CEO and the assistant. Only 2 people, each carrying their own scars, find solace in one another by chance. They left the restaurant close to 11 p.m. London sparkled under its lights. The river breeze was cold but pleasant. Adrian walked beside her, keeping just enough distance, yet Clara felt the warmth of his presence. "Tonight," he said, his voice low and warm, "thank you for sharing with me. I've never said these things to anyone else." Clara smiled, her gaze gentle. "Me neither. Maybe. Sometimes you just need someone who'll really listen." They stopped at the river's railing, where the lights reflected in shimmering ribbons. Adrian looked at her, his eyes deep as if they held more words than he could speak. But at last he only whispered, "Good night, Clara." She nodded, walking away, her heart swelling with a sweet yet dangerous feeling. She was beginning to see the real Adrian Whitmore, and she was letting him touch the deepest part of her own heart. The days following that evening at the Italian restaurant by the Thames, Clara's life no longer felt the same. On the surface, everything remained unchanged. Meetings, relentless schedules, exhausting reports. But beneath that polished exterior, another world was quietly unfolding, a world that belonged only to her and Adrian. Every night when London sank into silence, Clara's phone lit up with a simple three-word message. "Are you awake?" It always came near midnight, when Adrian had finally finished a day filled with negotiations and board meetings. Clara, lying in bed with the glow of her screen on her face, felt her heart race as she typed back. Their conversations stretched on for hours, covering everything from small details, like the book she was reading or his favorite childhood meal, to confessions neither had ever shared with anyone else. Clara found herself both thrilled and at peace. With each message, Adrian was no longer the cold CEO of Whitmore Media, but a man slowly revealing his most genuine fragments. By day, in the vast office with its gleaming glass walls, they were forced back into their roles. CEO and assistant. Clara reviewed schedules. Adrian nodded at the reports, his voice once again deep and cool. But sometimes in fleeting moments the mask cracked. When she set a file on his desk, his hand brushed hers, so quick outsiders wouldn't notice, but enough to send a spark running up Clara's spine. In the elevator, when only the two of them remained, Adrian sometimes stood close enough that his breath grazed her neck. Clara pretended to focus on the glowing numbers, but her heart felt ready to leap from her chest. His eyes, too, had changed. No longer indifferent, but lingering, like a flame burning quietly for her alone. Sophie Taylor, her colleague and Clara's only real friend at the company, was the first to notice these subtle shifts. On Monday morning, Sophie tapped on Clara's desk, squinting playfully. "You're hiding something from me, aren't you? You've been glowing these days, like you just won the lottery." Clara flinched, quickly covering her phone. "No, nothing at all. I probably just got enough sleep." "Enough sleep?" Sophie smirked. "If Clara Evans suddenly starts sleeping well, I'll wear slippers to the office." "Come on, spill it. Are you in love?" Clara forced a laugh, dodging. "Sophie, you're imagining things." But inside, worry began to creep in. Sophie wasn't stupid. After 3 years at Clara's side, she was sharp enough to see how one little message could make Clara blush. If Sophie was suspicious already, how long before others in the company caught on? Those secret days were the sweetest Clara had ever known, and the most conflicted. With Adrian, she felt truly alive. He took her for walks along the river on nights when no one was watching, bought her hot cocoa, and they sat on benches watching the city lights shimmer in the water. In those moments, Adrian wasn't the proud Whitmore heir, but a man who listened quietly, who smiled when she told childhood stories. "One night," Clara recalled, "my mom used to work double shifts to raise my sister and me. Dinner was usually just toast, but she always tried to make me believe it was a feast. Maybe that's why I love simple things." Adrian stayed quiet for a long time. Then he said softly, "Clara, do you know, when you tell stories like that, I feel like I'm seeing real life for the first time. Not prestige, not pressure, just family and love." His words made Clara's eyes sting, but at the same time fear crept in. She knew the gap between them all too well. He was a CEO. She was only an assistant. He belonged to a prestigious lineage. She was a girl raised in a small flat in the suburbs. Could this happiness endure? Or was it just a fragile secret, ready to shatter once exposed to the light. One night when Adrian walked her home to the gate of her apartment, Clara lingered in silence. He looked at her, eyes gentle, as if waiting for a question. "Adrian," she whispered, "if one day people find out, what will happen? To me? To you? To this career?" He took her hand and squeezed firmly. "Clara, I don't care what others say. I only care about you, but if you're worried, then we'll go slow. As long as you don't walk away from me." The promise was sweet as honey, yet Clara's heart still felt heavy. She wanted to believe it, but she wasn't sure love alone could withstand the scrutiny and harsh judgment of the world outside. The Whitmore Media Building gleamed under the morning sun, but inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was darker than ever. Adrian sat at the head of the table, flipping through the report with steady hands, though his mind was far from the numbers on the page. The past days had been filled with unfamiliar emotions, sweet, warm, but precarious. Clara had entered his life like a gentle breeze, carrying a light he had never realized he needed. But that very light now seemed to be attracting lurking shadows. Edward Collins, the young, ambitious vice president, sat a few seats away, his sharp eyes always watchful. Edward was known for his cunning and calculation. Born into a modest business family, he had clawed his way up with sheer ruthlessness and strategy. To him, succeeding Adrian was the only goal. And now he had found a weakness. That afternoon, when Adrian returned to his office after a meeting, Edward appeared unexpectedly and shut the door behind him. "We need to talk privately," Edward said smoothly, though his eyes glinted with triumph. Adrian looked up, calm. "Is it something so urgent you couldn't put it in an email?" Edward placed a thick envelope on the wooden desk. "I think this will interest you." Adrian opened it. Inside were sharp, clear photographs, him and Clara by the Thames, gazes lingering with quiet intimacy, him holding the door open for her at the Italian restaurant, their hands brushing as they left. Adrian's chest tightened, but his expression did not shift. "You had me followed?" His voice was low, cold. Edward shrugged, smirking. "In business, Adrian, one must always know one's opponent. And now, I hold quite the card." He stepped closer, lowering his voice as though sharing a secret. "You know as well as I do, if these photos got out, the tabloids would have a field day. The CEO of an international media empire, caught in a romantic relationship with his personal assistant. It would be the end of your reputation, and the Whitmore family's name." Adrian's hands clenched into fists, but he stayed silent. Edward pressed on. "I'll keep this quiet, on one condition. You'll vote for me as CEO of European operations in the upcoming election. And one more thing, your little assistant, Clara Evans, must be fired immediately. Otherwise, this scandal goes public." The final words cut like a knife. Adrian raised an eyebrow, fury flashing in his silver-gray eyes. "You're threatening me?" Edward smiled easily. "No, I'm giving you a choice." When Edward left, silence pressed heavily against the walls. Adrian remained still, staring at the photographs scattered across the desk. Each frame had once captured the most private, tender moments between him and Clara. Now they were twisted into weapons. Two storms battled inside him, seething rage at being manipulated and fear for Clara. If this broke, she would be the one hurt most. She'd be scrutinized, slandered, and perhaps even lose the career she had built with sweat and determination. Adrian pressed his palm against his forehead. Since childhood, he'd been taught that a Whitmore never yielded, that family honor outweighed everything. But for the first time, he found himself ready to defy all of that, for one woman. That afternoon, Clara came by with documents. She knocked gently, stepped inside, and instantly sensed the heaviness in the air. The photographs still lay on the desk. Her eyes fell on them, and her breath caught. There she was, captured in one frozen smile beside Adrian. Clara's body went cold, blood rushing to her face. "Adrian, what is this?" Her voice trembled. He quickly gathered the photos, shoving them back into the envelope. "Nothing. Leave it to me." "Nothing? I just saw..." "That's..." Her throat tightened, shame and fear colliding. Who, who did this? Adrian stepped toward her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, his gaze softening. Clara, listen to me. This is not your fault. Someone is trying to use us. But I will not let anyone hurt you. Her eyes brimmed. But what if, because of me, your career is destroyed? If the whole world finds out? He tightened his hold, cutting her off. I'd rather lose everything than lose you. His words struck Clara speechless. Part of her trembled with emotion, but another part clenched with dread. They were stepping into dangerous territory, where even the smallest misstep could drag them both into the storm. That night, Adrian sat alone in his darkened office, the city lights glowing faintly against the glass walls. The envelope from Edward Collins lay on his desk, heavy with menace. On one side of the scale, power, honor, the untouchable position of a Whitmore CEO. On the other hand, Clara, the woman he had never expected, yet now the most precious thing in his life. Outside, the wind howled across the Thames, carrying the chill of winter's approach. Adrian knew this was only the first of many storms, and he would have to choose his path, even if it dragged the entire Whitmore legacy into an upheaval like never before. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands of listeners and sharers come together. Late October in London, rain drizzled in thin sheets, the gray sky mirroring Clara's own mood. In recent days, the atmosphere at the company had grown unbearably heavy. Edward Collins kept appearing with that smug smile, his sharp gaze reminding Adrian again and again that he held the secret capable of destroying everything. Adrian had fought to resist. Quietly, he had tried to neutralize Edward, but the man's network and greed made every plan nearly impossible. Night after night, Adrian stayed in his office until dawn, staring through the thick glass at the endless stream of cars below. He knew Edward wouldn't stop, and if the scandal broke, not only the company, but the Whitmore family name would be tarnished. Yet what tore at him most wasn't his career. It was the image of Clara caught in the center of public scrutiny, subjected to cruel whispers and ruthless headlines. One late night, Clara's usual text popped up on his phone. "Did you have dinner yet?" Adrian stared at the screen for a long time. He didn't reply. Instead, a brutal decision settled in his chest. The only way to protect her was to let go. The next morning, Clara walked into his office as always, her hand carrying the day's schedule. "Adrian, you have a board meeting at 3 today. I've rescheduled." "Clara?" His deep voice cut across hers. She looked up, startled. Adrian sat behind his desk, his face calm, but his eyes colder than she had ever seen. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time we stopped. This relationship cannot continue." For a moment, Clara thought she had misheard. "Stopped? You mean you should leave Whitmore Media?" His words fell like a blade. She stumbled back a step, clutching the folder. "You want to fire me?" "Not fire you," Adrian said evenly, controlling his tone. "Just, if you resign, everything ends here. It will be safer for you." Clara's heart clenched. She understood at once. Edward, the photos. But what hurt more than the truth itself was that Adrian had chosen to push her away rather than fight beside her. "You think I'm so weak I need to be hidden?" Her voice shook, but carried a cold edge. "You said I was the most precious thing to you, and now you treat me like a stain to erase." Adrian closed his eyes, drawing a deep breath, but said nothing. He knew if he looked too long into her eyes, he would break. Clara bit her lip until it bled, then turned sharply and walked out. That afternoon, Clara submitted her resignation. The HR office door shut behind her, leaving her hollow inside. On the paperwork, the reason for leaving was written simply, "Personal matters." But in her heart, the real reason was heartbreak. The man she loved most had chosen to push her away in the name of protection. In her small South Kensington flat, Clara sat for hours with her phone in her hand. Adrian's last message was still there, never deleted. She typed, "You're a coward," then erased it. Typed, "I love you," then erased that too. At last the screen dimmed, leaving only heavy silence. Sophie Taylor, her best friend and former colleague, couldn't stand by and watch Clara fall apart. One evening, she dragged her out of the apartment to a small cafe they often visited. Clara, I know what happened, Sophie said bluntly, her eyes serious. Edward is disgusting, but why did you give up? You love Adrian, I can see it clearly, and I'm certain he loves you too. Clara gave a bitter laugh, her eyes red. Love? If he loved me, he wouldn't have pushed me away like something disposable. He chose the company, the reputation, not me. No, Clara, Sophie shook her head. I think Adrian chose this path because he believed it was the only way to protect you. Men can be so foolish that they think sacrificing love makes them heroes. Heroes, Clara scoffed, her laugh sharp with pain. To me, it's betrayal. I don't need a cold Adrian protecting me from afar. I need an Adrian who dares to stand by my side. Sophie squeezed her hand. You'll regret it if you walk away. Don't give up on love just because of fear. Clara pulled her hand back, her eyes steely. Sophie, I've already decided. I have nothing left to lose except my dignity, and I will hold on to that. Night fell over London. In her empty apartment, Clara sat by the window, watching the city lights blur through her tears. Somewhere else in a high-rise office, Adrian sat alone too, his gaze vacant against the skyline. Two souls in love and in pain, separated by decisions meant to protect, but that instead cut the fragile thread between them. The 35th floor office of Whitmore Media looked the same. The desk neatly arranged, glass walls overlooking the Thames, a packed schedule pinned on the board. But to Adrian, everything had become meaningless. Since Clara left, the air in the office felt strangely hollow. Reports were still delivered on time, but without her neat handwriting. Meetings were still organized, but there was no soft voice reminding him before each one. His morning coffee still arrived, but never quite right anymore. No one remembered he liked less sugar. He sat in the vast office surrounded by glass and steel, yet inside he felt as cold as an empty room. Clara had taken the warmth with her. Each night, Adrian stared at his phone. The dark screen reflected his face, tired, hollow, and above all, filled with regret. He missed her short messages, the way she smiled when she walked into the room, the mixture of shyness and determination in her eyes when she debated a report. He knew he had made a mistake. He had believed that pushing her away was a way to protect her, but distance had only robbed him of the one person who made him feel alive. In board meetings, his words remained sharp and precise, but whenever he lifted his gaze, it drifted unconsciously to the spot where Clara used to stand and take notes. Empty. One afternoon, as Adrian buried himself in files, his office door swung open. Sophie Taylor stepped in without waiting for the secretary's announcement. Do you have a minute? Her tone was blunt, no pretense. Adrian looked up, frowning. Taylor, this is work hours. All the more reason to say this now. Sophie shut the door and strode to his desk. Her bright eyes held his, unflinching. Do you really think you're doing the right thing, Adrian? He leaned back, voice cold. I don't know what you're referring to. Sophie let out a short, bitter laugh. You know exactly what I mean. Clara resigned. She's so broken she can't even bear to look back. And all because you chose to let go. Because you were a coward. The word coward struck Adrian like a fist to the chest. He froze, anger flickering in his eyes, only to fade into a dull ache. Sophie pressed on. Do you know what Clara told me? She said you belittled her, that you didn't believe she was strong enough to stand with you through the storm. You turned her love into humiliation. Adrian's hands curled into fists, nails digging into his skin. His chest ached with every word. She's getting ready to leave London, Sophie continued, her tone softening. She told me she wants to go back home, get away from it all, start over. If you let her leave this time, you'll lose her forever. In that instant, it felt as if lightning had struck Adrian's mind. The thought of Clara leaving London, taking her smile and her light with her, nearly stole his breath. He shot to his feet, striding to the glass wall and staring out over the misty city. For years, he had believed that power, honor, and the Whitmore name were everything. But now, none of it mattered compared to the one woman who had awakened his frozen heart. No, Adrian murmured, voice firm. I won't let her go. He turned, his eyes blazing with a resolve Sophie had never seen before. "Thank you for telling me," Adrian said quietly, but his voice carried the weight of a vow. Sophie smiled, relieved he had finally understood. "Then don't just stand here. Go find her, before it's too late." Night fell over London, the lights along the Thames glittering like 1,000 artificial stars. In her apartment, Clara packed old books into cardboard boxes, her heart heavy. She thought she had made her decision, to leave the city, to leave Adrian, to leave even her dreams behind. But somewhere else, Adrian stepped out of his office for the first time, not toward files or meetings, but toward a single goal, to win Clara back before she slipped out of his life forever. The small South Kensington flat was filled with cardboard boxes, clothes folded neatly, books tied up with a string, family photo frames stacked in a pile on the floor. Clara sat cross-legged on the carpet, her hands trembling as she wrapped an old ceramic mug. Every movement felt heavy, as if she were wrapping her own heart in layers of cold newspaper. She had decided to leave London, to leave behind a city full of memories, a city that held the man she had trusted, only to receive a cruel decision in return. Outside the window, London was gray, a light drizzle falling. Clara wiped the rain off the glass, but her vision blurred again with tears. A knock sounded at the door, urgent, insistent. Clara startled, setting the roll of tape down in a hurry. "Clara, open the door! It's me!" She froze, that voice, low, familiar, carrying a tremor unlike the cold man from boardroom meetings. "You shouldn't be here," Clara replied, her voice catching as she fought for composure. "Please, open the door. Just this once." Her heart pounded. Logic told her not to. Seeing him now would only tear the wound open. But her heart couldn't quite turn away. The door swung open. Adrian stood there, soaked from the rain, hair falling over his forehead, his shirt clinging to his body. His silver-gray eyes no longer held pride, only desperation laced with resolve. He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the cluttered room of boxes. For a moment, he seemed unable to breathe. "You're really leaving?" Adrian asked, his voice hoarse. Clara crossed her arms, turning away. "What reason do I have to stay? You made yourself perfectly clear. I was just a burden, a risk to your reputation." Adrian took a step closer, pain flickering in his eyes. "Clara, I was wrong. I was a coward. I let fear control me. I thought letting go was the only way to protect you. But these past days—" He stopped, inhaling shakily. "I realized I can't live without you. The office, the company, everything became hollow without you there." Clara was silent. These were the words she had longed to hear, but the wound in her heart wouldn't let her believe them so easily. Adrian moved closer still, his eyes shining with determination. "I love you, Clara Evans. I love you more than this company, more than the Whitmore name. If I have to choose, I choose you. Always." The room fell into silence. Only the sound of rain against the window and Clara's pounding heart filled the space. Then, to her astonishment, Adrian knelt right there on the messy living room floor, amid unsealed boxes. No flowers, no ring, no script. Only a man stripping himself of pride and laying his heart bare. "I have nothing in my hands right now but my love for you," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "Clara, marry me. Give me the chance to make this right, to protect you, not with distance, but with my life." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face, her heart torn violently in two. Part of her wanted to turn away, to keep her dignity, to punish the cowardice that had wounded her. But the deeper part, the part that had always loved him, throbbed with longing for the man kneeling before her. "Adrian," her voice trembled, "are you sure? I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." He looked up, his eyes burning. "I'm sure. Losing you is losing everything." Clara's breath hitched, her heart aching but swelling with sweetness. She looked at him, his wet hair, his earnest eyes, his pride laid aside, and realized this was no longer the cold CEO. This was Adrian, the man pouring his whole heart into hers. She knelt down in front of him, her trembling hands covering his. Tears fell again, but this time they were tears of happiness. "I wanted to hate you," she sobbed, But I can't, because I love you too much, more than I ever dared admit. Relief flickered in Adrian's eyes. Then, you'll say yes? Clara hesitated for a breath, then nodded softly, whispering through her broken breath. Yes. The small room, cluttered with boxes, became a witness to a new beginning. No engagement ring, no flowers, no audience. Just two people, a belated confession, and a love that had overcome everything. Outside, the rain still fell, but inside them a flame had just been lit, and this time nothing could extinguish it. The boardroom on the top floor of Whitmore Media had never been this crowded, or this tense. Every member of the executive team was present, their eyes fixed on the head of the long table, where Adrian sat. His face was composed, but his eyes burned with resolve. Beside him, Clara entered with a rare calmness. Though her hands trembled slightly, she knew there was no more room for secrets today. Adrian rose to his feet, his deep voice echoing across the room. Before we begin, I have a personal announcement to make. Clara Evans, my former executive assistant, is the woman I love. We are in a serious relationship. A ripple of murmurs ran around the table. Some frowned, others looked surprised, but no one dared interrupt. Clara drew in a steadying breath, her heart tight, but the proud look in Adrian's eyes gave her the courage to stand tall. And, Adrian continued, his gaze cutting across the room like steel, I will not allow anyone to use this to threaten me or to harm her. At the far end of the table, Edward Collins smirked, his eyes gleaming with malice. Slowly he stood, placing a thick folder and an envelope of photos on the table. How noble of you, Adrian, Edward said, his tone dripping with mockery. But the board here has a right to know the truth. This is undeniable evidence. The CEO of this corporation has been dating his subordinate, violating professional ethics and endangering the company's reputation. He flicked his chin toward Clara, his voice heavy with insinuation. This is nothing less than a sex scandal. If this goes public, you and Whitmore Media will be mocked internationally. A few board members shifted uneasily, not openly agreeing, but clearly worried. The air in the room was thick, ready to explode. But Adrian remained calm. He looked directly at Edward, his gray eyes glinting with cold steel. You're right, Edward. The board deserves to know the truth, so let me show you the whole truth. He tapped the table lightly. At once, the large screen at the front of the room flickered on, displaying rows of documents and charts. This, Adrian said, his voice steady, is the internal investigation I've been conducting for the past 2 weeks. It details how Edward Collins secretly set up shell companies to siphon millions of pounds from our marketing funds. It also shows that he hired a private investigator illegally to track my personal life and the lives of our employees, an egregious violation of privacy law. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Edward paled, stepping back half a pace. This is fabricated, Edward shouted, but his voice cracked. Adrian didn't move. He pressed another button, and the screen filled with a string of emails, bank transfers, and forensic images, each stamped with authentication from an independent auditing firm. Fabricated? Adrian's voice was like a blade. Ask your own bank account where this money went, straight into the shell company you created, and I trust the board will not tolerate a corrupt executive sitting in the vice president's chair. For a few seconds, the room went silent. Then it erupted. The chair of the board stood, his voice grave. Edward Collins, you have betrayed this company. You are hereby stripped of your position immediately. All files will be handed over to the authorities for investigation. Edward's face turned ashen. He tried to speak, but no one listened. Security entered, escorting him out. The door shut behind him, leaving a heavy but newly brightened air in the room. Adrian exhaled slowly, as if a weight had been lifted from his chest. He turned to Clara, and for the first time in front of the entire board, his eyes held nothing but tenderness. I won't deny that I love Clara, but I will deny any suggestion that this love has weakened me. On the contrary, it's what gave me the strength to stand up to people like Edward. Clara's fingers tightened, her eyes misting. In that moment, she understood. Adrian was no longer the man who chose to protect her from a distance. He had chosen to stand beside her, out in the open, under the scrutiny of all, and to declare that this love was worth keeping. The board was silent until one member finally spoke up. Adrian, you've handled this crisis with integrity. If you believe this love makes you stronger, we have no reason to oppose it. When the meeting ended, Adrian walked out with Clara. The rest of the company still had no idea what had just happened behind closed doors, but inside one thing was clear. They had won, not only against Edward, not only preserving the company, but also protecting a love they had both thought lost. In the bright white hallway, Adrian took Clara's hand firmly. I once chose to let go, he whispered, but today I choose you. In front of everyone, Clara smiled, tears glimmering under the lights. This time there was no more torment. This time she knew they belonged to each other. A year after the storm, London welcomed summer with gentle golden sunlight draping over its old rooftops. In a centuries-old rose garden on the outskirts of the city, blossoms filled the air with sweetness, as if reserved for this day, the wedding of Clara Evans and Adrian Whitmore. There was nothing extravagant, nothing ostentatious, just a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by family and close friends. White chairs lined the petal-strewn aisle, while the soft notes of a violin floated in the air, guiding the bride's steps. Clara walked slowly, clutching a bouquet of white roses, Sophie at her side as maid of honor. Her wedding dress was simple yet elegant, highlighting her natural beauty and grace. In the front row, her mother and sister wept openly, their hands clasped tightly in happiness. Just as Clara neared the end of the aisle, a small stir rose at the garden gate. An older couple entered, flanked by several members of the Whitmore family. Clara froze for a moment, her heart sinking. She had heard much about Adrian's strict parents, about the weight of tradition in his lineage. Deep inside, she feared this moment would cast a shadow over her happiest day. But as they approached, she saw something unexpected in the silver-haired woman's eyes. Kindness. The woman smiled, took her son's hand, and then turned to Clara. Clara, my dear, thank you for giving Adrian something we had never seen in him before. True joy. Adrian's stern father gave a solemn nod, his deep voice firm. I once feared my son would only ever know duty and honor. But since you came into his life, Clara, I see that he has learned how to live as a man. Today we are not just welcoming a daughter-in-law, but a member of our family. The entire garden fell silent for a moment. Clara broke into tears while Adrian squeezed her hand, his eyes shining brighter than ever. The ceremony continued, steeped in emotion. The officiant asked, Adrian Whitmore, do you take Clara Evans to be your wife, to love and cherish her for the rest of your life? Adrian looked straight into Clara's eyes, his voice strong and unwavering. I do. And before everyone here, family, friends, colleagues, I want to say, Clara is the most precious part of my life. Tears streamed down Clara's face. When her turn came, her voice trembled. I do. I choose you, not because you are a Whitmore, but because you are Adrian, the man who dared to give up everything just to keep me. Applause thundered, mingled with the happy sobs of Clara's mother and sister. Adrian's parents also clasped hands, their gaze warm as they looked upon the newlyweds. The reception that followed was modest but filled with love. On rustic wooden tables draped with lace cloths, glasses of wine glimmered in candlelight. Guests raised their glasses in heartfelt toasts, laughter ringing through the evening. Clara's mother embraced her tightly, whispering, "You've found your happiness, and I know your father is smiling down from above." Emma wiped her tears, then turned to Adrian with mock sternness. "Brother-in-law, remember, if you ever make my sister cry, you'll have to answer to our whole family." Adrian chuckled, pulling Clara into his arms. "I promise I'll protect her all my life." On the other side, Adrian's father lifted his glass toward his son. "You've made me proud, Adrian. Not because you saved the company, but because you held on to your heart." As the sun dipped low, the rose garden was bathed in golden light. Clara rested her head on Adrian's shoulder, feeling his arms wrap around her. Laughter, music, and the fragrance of roses wove together into a portrait of simple, everlasting happiness. In the glow of twilight, Adrian whispered into her ear, "I once thought the honor of my family was everything, but now I know. True family begins here, with you and me." Through her tears, Clara smiled softly and whispered back, And together, we'll write the rest of that story. Adrian and Clara's riverside villa, nestled behind a row of ancient trees along the Thames, sat not far from the heart of London. Yet it felt like an entirely different world. Its wide windows opened out onto a lush green lawn where each morning's light shimmered across the water. No longer the cold glass and steel office on the 35th floor, no longer the lonely nights of silence. Adrian now began each day with something simple yet complete: Clara's presence. Every morning as the first rays filtered through the curtains, Clara was the one to rise first. She padded barefoot across the wooden floor, her hair loosely tied, her eyes still touched with drowsiness, but her smile always bright. In their warm kitchen, she placed the familiar green porcelain mug on the table. Adrian had once brought it back absent-mindedly from an international conference. Plain, unremarkable, but over time it had become their symbol of love. Since their wedding day, Clara had never failed to brew his black coffee without sugar, just the way he liked it. Yet when she set it before him, it was no longer just a habit. It was a quiet ritual, a vow whispered anew. Every morning, I choose you again. Adrian would walk in, hair slightly tousled, his shirt half-buttoned. Seeing Clara stirring his coffee, he would smile faintly, wrap his arms around her from behind, and rest his chin on her shoulder. I never thought coffee could smell like happiness, he murmured. Clara laughed softly, handing him the green cup. Maybe that's because it isn't just coffee. It's love stirred in. He took a sip, the silver gray of his eyes catching the sunlight. I'd agree with that. Married life was not all sweetness. Adrian remained CEO of Whitmore Media, carrying the weight of endless responsibilities. Clara, after stepping away from her role as assistant, began building her own social media project focused on books and culture, one that quickly gained wide acclaim. They were both busy. At times, schedules would cause them to miss dinner together, or sudden business trips would disrupt their plans. There were nights when Clara felt Adrian was too cold, too lost in his work, leaving her behind again, and moments when Adrian worried that Clara poured too much of herself into her project, neglecting rest, his concerns spilling into irritation. One winter evening, the tension boiled over. Clara accused him of not listening. Adrian retorted that she was too stubborn. Their voices clashed, sharp and aching, filling the small kitchen with sounds unworthy of love. Clara turned away, her eyes shining with tears. If this keeps going, what's the difference between us now and back then, when we stood on opposite sides of the world? The words jolted Adrian awake. He stepped forward, pulling her into his arms, his voice breaking. I've lost you once before, and I know what it feels like to live with that emptiness. I would rather argue with you every day than live in silence without you. Forgive me. Clara turned back, her tears glistening, but her lips curved in a trembling smile. I chose you once, and I'll keep choosing you, even on the hardest days. They held each other tightly, realizing that marriage wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the choice to stay, to choose each other again, even after every conflict. Exactly 1 year after their rose garden wedding, Clara's phone lit up with a message from Sophie. Clara, Adrian, watching you two today only proves to me that sometimes the smallest mistakes lead to the greatest love. Happy anniversary. P.S. Sending you this keepsake. Attached was a photo, the selfie Clara had once taken in her pale camisole, smiling under the soft glow of lamplight. The photo that had sent her into a panic, sparking scandal, fear, and heartbreak. The very photo that had begun everything. Clara stared at the screen, then burst into laughter through her tears. She handed it to Adrian. Do you remember this picture? He raised an eyebrow, then laughed too, his eyes shining with profound happiness. Clara sat down beside him, resting her head against his shoulder. If it weren't for that ridiculous pajama photo, we might not be here today. Adrian set down his coffee cup, leaned in, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. His breath was warm against her skin as he whispered, almost like a vow, sometimes love is the most beautiful mistake of all. And that photo, that was the best mistake I ever made. Clara closed her eyes, letting her heart echo in the stillness. From one misdirected message, from one careless smile, they had walked through storms, faced judgment, battled fear, And now they sat here hand in hand, with the river flowing quietly beside them. Outside the window, the Thames glimmered in the afternoon light. Inside their riverside villa, a husband and wife sat side by side, recalling a memory that once felt foolish, but had changed their lives forever. They understood now. Their love had not begun in perfection, but in chance, in a mistake. And yet, by daring to embrace that mistake, by daring to move past fear and choose each other every single day, they had built something enduring. On the kitchen shelf, the green porcelain cup still stood, filled with black coffee and countless memories. A reminder for Adrian and Clara that true happiness doesn't come from flawless plans, but from the ordinary moments where two people make the decision to choose each other today, tomorrow, and for all their days to come. Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family.